Thank you, members. I rise to present AJR 28, which requests a presidential pardon and expungements of Mr. Bernard James' record. Bernard James was born in Chicago in 1921. His mother was Creole from Haiti. His father was mixed African-American and Cherokee background. Mr. James was drafted into the Army in 1943 and served in the segregated 641st Ordnance Company. However, all black units were still required to be led by white commanding officers. Not surprisingly, this led to racially motivated discrimination from the white officers in these units. Mr. James experienced this discrimination firsthand when he spoke in protest against an action taken by his commanding officer. This officer had demoted a soldier for answering a question truthfully after the officer explicitly told him to speak freely. When Mr. James protested the unjust actions taken by his white officer, he too was demoted and was one of 18 soldiers arrested and sentenced to 18 years in prison for speaking truthfully and honestly and standing up for what's just. Mr. James' sentence was lifted in 1946, and then he returned to serve in Italy despite the U.S. Army never officially pardoning him. Mr. James was listed AWOL 107 during his time in prison and did not receive credit for his time served during this time. Mr. James was court-martialed, and ultimately, an ultimate time served in prison was racially motivated and is wrong and must be corrected. Mr. James just turned 101, and he has one wish for his birthday, that his record be expunged before he passes on. Mr. James deserved to have his record expunged during his lifetime, which is why this is so important that we urge Congress to act swiftly in this case. Upon returning home to his native Chicago post-World War II, James began to rebuild his life. He began working as an engineer and engaged in activism as a member of the Catholic Social Justice Ministry and Friendship House. Upon moving to Los Angeles, Mr. James employed his engineering skills that were coveted by the aerospace industry. He worked on both the Apollo and the Mercury space explorations. On a personal note, Mr. James is a math tutor just like mine and oftentimes has worked with our local youth to help them get through their math anxiety to ensure that doesn't hold them back. As of March 7, 2022, the U.S. Army informed Mr. James and the family of official change of his service record. The 18 months he was unjustly incarcerated and listed AWOL had been corrected. But his AWOL status cannot be fully stricken from his record without congressional action. Unfortunately, the board that cleared his AWOL status does not have authority to convey an official pardon. AJR 27 asks President Joe Biden to pardon Mr. James as soon as possible and officially expunge this incident from his record and bring justice once and for all for the Bernard family. This resolution will honor Mr. James and his service during World War II, and most importantly, honor him and his calling for always standing up for what's right, even in the face of adversity, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.